Hey everybody, Scotty Milas, ScottMilasFranchiseCoach.com. Welcome to another episode of What's Your Know Your Why, and all things considering franchises. Good to be with you again today. I have a really unique guest with me today. Really an interesting background. I'm really curious once we get into the conversation how, with his background, he got into franchising. I can't wait to get down that road, because when I look his LinkedIn profile and I do some research, I'm scratching my head. The industries that he was in to get into the luxury salon suites category is just unique. But I want to welcome Jason Olsen, who is president and founder of Image Studios, one of my favorite, if not the favorite, executive model franchises. This touches on a lot of bells and whistles for that investor, semi-absentee owner, want to own the real estate down the road. I mean, it just touches on a lot of points. I consider it to be a big boy investment, big girl investment, but it's unique. A lot of strong validation. So Jason, welcome to Scotty Milas, ScottMilasFranchiseCoach.com, all things considered franchising. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity, or I've had the opportunity to work with one of your developers on a number of deals now, placements, very unique model. But as I mentioned in my opening, you have an interesting background, automotive. I think there might have been something in there in regards to being in the kind of the equity forum, equity category. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but maybe just give our listeners a little background about yourself and, how and why salon suites. I mean, where's the connection here?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So to start from the beginning, and I'll be quick on this, but I started my first company my junior year of high school when I was 17. It was called streetlooks.com. This was back when the internet was sending you, AOL discs in the mail for 30 minutes of free internet. Like internet
Prodigy,
1.0.
right? Prodigy.com, whatever
Oh,
it
yeah,
was.
Earthlink and all that.
Yeah, there we go.
Someone rings, calls the house and you get kicked off the internet. And so it was those days. But it was Street Looks was a website that I bought and sold aftermarket car lighting and accessories. I did this just as a hobby at first to make extra money to work on my car. But quickly this thing grew and scaled. We started shipping nationwide. I ended up hiring my younger brother as my first hire. My mom was my second hire. A year into it, our whole basement had been converted to an inventory warehouse. And I ran this and grew this for 7 years. I ended up selling the company my junior year of college. And once I did that, I started buying and selling cars through the student newspaper, and ended up getting in a little bit of trouble with the DMV because I was selling more cars than it was allowed without a dealer's license. And so ended up getting a dealer's license and started building and growing a small dealership, which turned into be a very large dealership in Utah. To what it is today, it's the third largest independent dealership in the state, right behind CarMax and Carvana. So it's a totally different business, automotive, especially automotive dealerships. I have, my family doesn't have a background in dealerships. It wasn't like, Grandpa Joe had a Ford dealership and then, Dad had, a Chrysler dealership. This was all sort of just organic as it grew and scaled. But during the recession of 08, 09, it just devastated sales for pretty much every industry. And I had one of my good friends come in. She was a hairstylist, and she bought a $40,000 Escalade that we had, and she pulled $20,000 cash out of her purse to put a down payment on that. And I tell you what, I didn't know anyone who was thriving in the recession, but I looked at her and she goes, I know things are tough, but she said, I promise my business is good. I'm making a good decision. And I said, okay, well, as long as you're good. But I said, you mean your business hasn't been affected? And she said, no, I've lost a couple clients, but I've stayed really busy. And I just was honed in on this because during this recession, I kept thinking, I don't want to be in automotive. I don't want to be in retail. I don't want to be tied to the economy so closely. And she ended up telling me about this concept she had heard about, which was called a salon suite. So it's similar to like WeWork or Office Evolution, where it's
Right.
executive office suites that people can rent for their startup, without any investment to build out, flexible lease terms. But instead of office suites, they're salon suites. So they're built as a miniature hair salon or a miniature nail salon or an esthetician's waxing studio, for one or two people to work. So I was just intrigued as hell about this model. And I ended up doing some research online. There was maybe 30 or 40 locations across the country at the time. And I ended up flying over the next 6 months to 7 different states to do some research on what this model was. I wanted to learn as much as I could.
Right.
Visited probably close to 20 locations in those 7 states. And just, I was convinced this is it. Like, I wanted to get out of retail. I wanted to get into something that was more semi-absentee, that was, we are in the beauty industry, but we're really property management. But, you get the strength of both industries. And that's where, leaving automotive and then coming into the beauty industry was literally, you couldn't find 2 industries further apart. But, I've always said everyone needs a car to drive and everyone needs a haircut and wants to look good. And so
Right.
you really look at, how does this industry have insulation against technology and automation? Because I'll tell you, the day that a robot can cut your hair, we're going to be so tired of automation and AI and all that, that we already are thriving for human contact. When we
Right.
call a support line and you actually get a human, it's like, thank God, we don't like automation to the point like we thought we did. And I think that's where you have a very protected industry, because beauty is not just about looking good, but it's also about feeling good and connecting with your professional. And that connection is really important. And so this is where, June 1st of 2010, I ended up opening the First Image Studios here in Salt Lake City, and then ended up opening 5 locations over the next 5 years, almost on the dot, 1 year at a time, and just started to grow and scale. And I loved the simplicity of the business model and the ability to scale. That was something I had never experienced in my past career. Scaling is extremely complex in the automotive industry.
Yeah.
But this was just, I had no employees for the first several stores. It was just me running the whole operation. Just fell in love with the business model. And then, where we're at today, we've got almost 200 licenses that have been sold across the country in 16 states, and then growing tremendously, from here on out. So it's been really exciting. And I feel like I wake up every day and it's not like work. It's like, it hasn't been a day of work since I started
Right.
this. And that's when, you've found your perfect fit, which I think everybody's looking for, which is,
Yeah.
what does the next chapter look like in my career?
What's ideal? I like to use the word ideal instead of perfect, but 2 points that you bring up that really kind of caught my attention is that, and just to touch on the franchising industry in general, it's amazing that if you do research and really take a deep dive into franchising and go back the last 30 years, how brands succeeded and flourished or actually emerged during a recession. It's just amazing. It's just, through a lot of hard work and analytics and data and really studying it, really, getting people interested. And the second part about what you said is, it really takes me to experience level within industries, that in franchising, you don't necessarily have to have industry experience per se in that category to be successful. I mean, you came out of automotive, but had that entrepreneur background, understood systems, best practices, how to work, and took something that had a 900-pound gorilla and decided, I'm going to tweak it and make it our own. And to me, that's just fascinating. I mean, did you do a lot of banging fists against the wall and on your desk as you were developing this whole thing? I mean, it's a great story.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I mean, even right before I signed the first lease for the first location, I was not in a great position financially. My other business was, at the time, we thought we were going to head towards bankruptcy. We were bleeding cash at every pore. But and I will admit this, but it's not a recommendation. But when I finally signed that first lease, I not only had to personally guarantee it like most leases, but I also had to have my other business guarantee it because the landlord didn't trust that. At the time I was
Wow.
28 years old, and he told me, he says, I don't know what a young guy like you wants to get into the beauty industry for. And I told him, I said, well, let's go over the business plan again, because it's a little bit of beauty, but it's a lot of real estate. It's a mix of both. And but it took a lot of credit cards and a lot of borrowing to get that first one open, because it was not a great time for me to be opening. But I was so determined to do this because I'll tell you what, Scott, the fear was crazy, but the fear of not doing anything and staying where I was what kept me up at night. It wasn't the fear of failure. It was the fear of failing to act. And I think that's a really important component to examine, which is, starting a business is scary. And depending on what stage of life you're in, what is that risk tolerance? This is where you've seen franchising really democratize entrepreneurship and business ownership across the country, especially in America, which is the most entrepreneurial country, I think, on the planet, in my opinion. But that's because franchising helps repeat patterns of success. And I think the key is, what do we as franchisors do to learn and hone in on what works and what doesn't, and then how do we replicate these patterns of success? The whole idea is you're hedging your bet against failure. And in the first 3-4 locations I did, there was constant mistakes of lessons learned. And I wish I could have just turned to someone who was doing similar, something like I was doing, and just say, what do you do when you're dealing with the situation, or how do you build the break room the right way, or how wide should every room be, just the right way, right? You have to learn through mistake and trial and error. But this is the beauty of franchising, is it's also access to all of this data, all of this, every bit of data, when used correctly, helps avoid a past mistake that you cannot repeat in the future. And that's really where it gets exciting, which is where now we have hundreds of franchisees across the country who are all doing the same business in their own business. And you can imagine the kind of collaboration and innovation that comes from a network effect of that. Whether it's, it's not just me now, it's me and everyone else who are all entrepreneurs working to better the brand, to make it the best that it is in the beauty industry. And I feel like we're doing a really great job at that.
You have something that that is unique, or at least your background is that you were an independent business owner. And as a consultant, and I'm sure your developers and you, as you were building the brand, talking to potential franchisees, people were coming in interested in learning more about the system, but a lot of people probably, and I get this, well, why can't I do this myself? Or why can't I do this, go rent a building and build some suites, or whatever business this is. But when we talk about franchising in general, Jason, we can all look at the analytics on franchises, how they're more successful than independents, the longevity of franchising versus independents. But twofold question: why would someone consider a franchise, and why should someone not consider a franchise? Any opinions on that? Any thoughts on that? And then we'll touch on some other things within the franchising industry. But it's always interesting to me when I talk to people. Oh, I could do that myself. I don't need to start a burger. I don't need a burger concept. I could start my own burger. What's your feeling when you look at franchising over independent? And you've done both, so
and when I was a car dealer, I used to envy the franchise dealers, the Toyota dealers and the Ford dealers and the BMW dealers, because they operate at a different level, right? They're just, there's a formula there that works, that you just have a hard time. You can't replicate because you don't know the formula when you're outside of the brand, right? So you have to try and do your best. And we did a great job, but there's nothing like a polished process that franchising delivers. I think, I have so much respect for entrepreneurs, because we're all kind of cut the same way. We have this idea, this drive, this determination, and sometimes this aversion to failure, which is you have to fail to be successful, but it's not going to hold us up. We're not scared of that. I would say it depends on your risk tolerance, whether you want to franchise or do your own thing. I think there is noble motives on either side. And I think people should be aware. You don't have to franchise if you want to start a business. There's absolutely no reason you have to, but it depends on your risk tolerance. I think it also depends on your ability to create and innovate and solve problems, and also your time frame of your investment. I think the younger you are, the more risk you can take, because you have more time to make up for any mistakes you make. And the older you get, as you get closer to for mid 40s and 50s and all that, there's also a time frame of how long do you want to work, and that window of when you want to work, how do you make sure it's the most productive window of opportunity? And sometimes starting from scratch takes a lot longer. There's a lot more mistakes, and you're the only person to share best practices with is yourself, because all of your peers in your industry, whatever you're doing, are your competitors. So it's really difficult to do that. But for some people like myself, that's what I get really motivated on, is I want to create from scratch and solve those problems. But I can also see how at some point, though, there's also, I remember on the third location I built, I told my brother, I was complaining about just some of these mistakes that were continually coming up. And I told him, I said, I wish I could have just bought a franchise, honestly, because I don't know, I'm making so many mistakes that are costing money. I wish I could just have this network to tap into, and I think I said that in a little bit of jest, but it was also some truth, which was it was exhausting trying to build at that pace, as basically, everyone I'm learning from, but the process of innovation is long and hard. Like, it's not, you don't just make one mistake and you figure it out. That's a fallacy, I think, in anything. The most successful entrepreneurs are constantly making mistakes. Because you're trying all these different things. Right. If you don't, you're not exploring every opportunity, and also putting closure to opportunities that aren't real ones that you might think are. And so, yeah, I think it comes down to risk tolerance, and it doesn't mean people that want to franchise couldn't do it on their own. They absolutely could. We're all entrepreneurs in this whole game. Right. It just comes down to how much do you want to be down and dirty, and how much grit do you want to deploy to start from scratch, or to tap into a successful system and accelerate from there. And so again, it just depends on that. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it, other than whichever way you do it the best you can.
As you were learning to grow, you started to open the studios. They were your businesses. Did you consider opening more, what we now refer to in the industry, obviously, as corporate locations, or what triggered you to franchise your business? Was it because I've worked with candidates and helped people franchise their business? It's part of what we do as consultants, partnerships that we work with companies. But what triggered you? Because it's an interesting topic. People say the easiest way, and I hate the word easiest, but the easiest way to grow or scale your business is to franchise it. Did you find that franchising was an easier way to grow, or was it analytical? Was it the numbers? Can you help our guests understand, if anyone's ever thinking about franchising something, what made you hit a point where I got to franchise it?
Yeah, it was when I was building the fourth location. This was 2013. I was actually enrolled in the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program that had just arrived to Salt Lake City for the first cohort. So you could apply. If you got in, you had to have a business that had scalability. And the focus of the 5-month program, which Goldman put on, was to work with some of their advisors and figure out what does a 5-year growth plan look like for your business. So I got into this program. I was so excited. It was an amazing program. Just learned some incredible things through Goldman Sachs and their network. But my growth plan was to build 30 corporate stores over the next 5 years, and then just kind of manage those and enjoy the success of that scale. And it was interesting because they kept drilling into our head. All our advisors was, you have to be thinking big. Are you thinking big enough? how big are you thinking? Are you thinking statewide, national, or global? Like they would challenge every assumption we had and say, is that thinking big enough? And I had a great advisor who kept challenging and saying, I don't think this is the best way to grow this brand. And they said, you should really consider franchising. And I had never once thought about it because I just figured franchising was for fast food.
Right.
And, you know, and now seeing that there's so many brands across the country that you see every day that you don't realize as
Exactly.
in general, I had no idea that was a franchise. That's franchise.
Yeah.
And so they ended up putting me in touch with a franchisor from Wiener Schnitzel.
Okay.
And ended up talking to that gentleman and just really got off that call with a lot of motivation to see like, wow, I did not realize that this could be franchised. And the idea of franchising is it is a faster way to scale, especially when you're in a, you know, any kind of brand that benefits from a national footprint. You know, having more stores, more exposure gets us more brand recognition, which raises our brand value and brand awareness. And it's good, you know, this is all good for everyone that's part of the brand. Going organically and growing corporate would have taken, to get to where we're at today, it would have taken another 15 years and $50 million in debt to do that. And it's just a lot more strategic way to grow. And it's really great because my favorite part about jumping into the franchise world and starting a franchise has been working with franchisees, our image owners. It's like, you know, you're working with partners in success. These are people, they're sophisticated, they've been successful in their career, but a lot of them have a common theme that runs through them, which is they've never, or they, at least at that point in time when they joined our brand, didn't feel like they had the next chapter figured out of their career. And maybe, you know, they're getting tired of the corporate world, they're getting tired of traveling for work, and they might realize maybe there's not a great opportunity to get promoted anymore because I'm starting to get older. You know, and the young guys they're hiring out of MBA school are all getting all the promotions and whatever it is. But there's a problem people solve when they start a business. Right. And I think that's the most important part is when people are thinking about starting a business, whether it's buying a franchise or starting from scratch, make sure you know the problem you're trying to solve. What is the problem? Is it I'm not satisfied with, I'm not challenged enough, I want more money, I want more freedom, anything, it doesn't matter.
Know
it's
your
just
why. Know the
know
the why.
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You know, I think there's a perception that when people, one of the questions I always ask people is, what's your no? I mean, why are we having this conversation? Why are you interested in business ownership? And, it's not uncommon for people to say, well, I just don't like my boss. And I go, well, that's great, but that's really not a reason, to open a business. So when you look at the MO of your franchisee, and I've done several placements with you guys, and again, interesting portfolios, two different backgrounds, several different backgrounds in the characteristics of those MO. But where is your MO for your franchisee? I mean, obviously there's the corporate executive, the person who may be a VP or a CEO, but where is that common MO that you're seeing within your franchise group, other than, I want to make a lot of money? Because everybody wants to make a lot of money, but is there a common MO within your franchise group, your franchisee group?
There is, and it's really interesting. Our core values at Image Studios are creativity, freedom, and success. And, the creativity part is obvious. We're in a creative industry. We build creative spaces. We work with creatives. They're artists, hairstylists, nail artists. Freedom is the freedom that the business model provides us as, people being part of it. You have a lot of flexibility and freedom. You're not tied down 9 to 5. And then that third value, success, is not money. Money is always a nice byproduct, but it's what this platform does. What Image Studios provides for beauty professionals is a platform for them to succeed. And there's something very altruistic about knowing that not only does your business make money, but it also does a really good thing. It's not just a transaction. And so when franchisees are investigating Image Studios, they start to resonate with that, which is, it's fun. This isn't no frills, right? This is a luxury brand. It's a gorgeous brand, gorgeous stores working in the beauty industry with top talent, that's checks off that creativity thing that I think everyone deep down, whether they think they're creative or not, it's inspiring to be in a creative role or in a creative industry. So that's huge. And then the freedom and success part again, which is people want flexibility. A lot of them are looking for ways to build generational wealth. So they're looking at, their kids are now getting into college and they're looking at maybe building and scaling several locations that maybe in 10 years, the kids start to take over. A lot of times too, we've got, with husband and wife teams is very common. And a lot of cases where the wife has had a career, but she's also had to give that up to raise kids. And now that the kids are getting out of the house, she's like ready to go back and kick some butt. Right. And so it's just like, it's so fun because everyone's super motivated. They all have their why figured out. But the unique thing I think is that the core values that are what motivated me to start the business, start the company, which are the company's core values today. Those are resonating so well with our image owners. And that is important because when you have an alignment with your partners in success, we're all in it for the same reason, right? We all get so much out of this. And so I think, again, it's like having a bigger purpose, knowing that what you're doing is doing something impactful to people. And I'll tell you, the stories you hear from these beauty professionals that move over and open their business, most for the first time, it's really touching because a lot of them never thought they could be an entrepreneur or never thought they would get to this point or never thought they'd have the opportunity. And all of a sudden they realize I did it and I'm successful. And there's nothing greater than that feeling of like, you take a risk and you put all the chips on the table and you realize, what was I worried about? Like, I've got this. Like, and I think it's not that everything goes perfect for any business owner, but the idea is you work your way through all of that, regardless of what you face. Like, that's what entrepreneurs have to do. You just keep pushing forward and solving problems. So it's a very high reward concept.
Yeah, it is. And I think there are two aspects of it. A couple of things that just to touch on a couple of things that you just kind of mentioned, kind of dig in a little bit. One of the things that I've always admired about your business is that there are not a lot of moving parts in the essence of employees. I think, it's safe to say it's either you're managing the business yourself, or you're hiring one person to show the studios, manage the day-to-day. There may be some contractors involved in there on the maintenance side. So that's number one. There's not a lot of moving parts. But one of the things that really fascinated me about what you offer, not only are you working with your franchisees as far as supporting marketing and operational support, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are working with the actual studio owners to help them become better business owners. Can you, did I word that right? I mean, because that's fascinating, because you could easily say, hey, look, it's your business, do whatever you want. But where is the connection for that? I mean, because I think that's unique.
Yeah. Our philosophy has always been to teach, train, and develop everyone that we are engaged with. So whether it's our corporate employees, our franchise owners, or our beauty professionals, and to support, educate, and empower them to be experts in their role. And I think the really fun part of this is that we've created our Image Pro business training program, which is a nationwide training that happens every month on Zoom for our beauty pros. They go to trade school to learn a skill. There's not a lot of business training at cosmetology school because they're going to learn, an actual skill. So the challenge is everyone that gets into business needs to understand the fundamentals of business. That's just how it works. If there's a part of business that's the same for every business. It's break even, it's margins, cost of goods, net profit, planning for taxes, buying inventory, raising prices, all the basic stuff. And even beyond that, we work with all these beauty pros so that they feel like they have the tools they need to not only be successful, but go to the next level of success. And that's the fun part too, which is my job, I get to work with entrepreneurs all day. Our image owners and our salon pros, we're all doing the same thing. We're all starting a business, running a business, growing a business. There couldn't be a better place for me to be playing, because that's what I love. Those are my people. These are people I relate to, and it's fun to be able to create content and do training that helps empower these people to be successful, and that's where my success has not been just, I just know this stuff inherently. I had to learn it as well. And that's where, we all, I think the key to successful business owners and entrepreneurs is they have this, thirst for knowledge, thirst for understanding things that they don't, no one comes out of the womb understanding how, a P&L is organized and how to understand how to read a balance sheet or anything like that. You have to learn those things. And sometimes they're not easy to learn for some people, but that doesn't mean you can't. And I think the biggest thing is we're trying to, help people understand that it's fun to become an expert as a business owner, not just to do your creative aspect that makes you good, but the other 50% of business, which is the nuts and bolts, you really get good at that because you have the ability to then predict outcomes a lot better, forecast.
Right. Well, you're actually helping. Yeah. I mean, your point is actually correct because you're helping your franchisees with training I don't want to, the relationship, the tenants, so to speak. And the more you have them involved and the more successful they are, the probably longer you're keeping them in those studios. Right. I mean, it's,
that's the whole philosophy, which is if, what goes around comes around. I think, how do we help make them stronger business owners? And I think over time, and what we're seeing is then we are rewarded with more loyalty and time on site because we have been a part in that, helping them succeed. It's important that, any business does some sort of something altruistic or give back. And in this case, it's the whole part of our business, which we're very lucky to do. But again, success begets success with, you teach people more, and then we build, in-depth programs that layer onto some of the basic ones and helping them just keep advancing to the next level of expertise as an entrepreneur.
Right.
And it's all free of, there's no charge for it for anyone that is at Image Studios across the country. We feel like that should be a bare necessity that they always have access to,
right.
And never have to pay, because it's just so valuable, and it just will help them so much.
So let me ask you this, just take a right turn here for a second, and not to bring politics or anything into this, but franchising is a very unique industry. Like I had mentioned before, I think I might have mentioned, if I didn't, there are 3,000 to 4,000 different brands out there, all different categories, all investment levels, but the industry is regulated, and there seems to be this push to get more regulations into it, that employee-employer, the franchisor relationship. Do you see the strength of franchising remaining the way it is and only improving? Because I get questions about this a lot when people are inquiring about franchising or business ownership. Should people be concerned about regulations, or is regulations good within this industry through the the Federal Trade Commission? I mean, is it good to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the heart of most regulations, there's a well-meaning intent. I think the challenge is bureaucracy takes that and morphs that into something that ends up being has a very little successful outcome of what the intent actually was. And, this one going on in California with, raising minimum wage to, I think, $25 an hour. I'm all for that, right? I'm all for people making as much money as possible. But when you eliminate a free market from functioning on its own, what California is going to do is they're trying to help out the guy that's making minimum wage. When California does this, what's going to happen is it's just going to motivate innovation that much faster to eliminate those jobs.
Yes.
McDonald's already has kiosks you can order from. You can imagine that there'll be even less people to take orders as technology improves ways to do, automated business. Unfortunately, it's actually going to hurt the person they're trying to protect. The intent is there, but the real cause and effect is actually going to hurt them more, because it's going to eliminate more jobs for those people that they're trying to help. And I think you've got to look at, I think regulation can play a role in economic growth, but it has to also be respectful of how a free market functions. And that's not how free market functions. I think you've got to have some guardrails, but you can't prescribe the runway. Otherwise,
that's a great. No, I think that's the answer that we were looking for. It's interesting. So let me ask you this question, going back to Image Studios, and we're kind of wrapping up here, and the people that are listening to this this podcast, broadcast, whatever you want to call it, who should pick up the phone and hit your website or call me to find out more? What person, somebody may say, hey, that isn't for me, or, I'm not sure, but what person should be picking up the phone and calling or reaching out for more information? Just take 30 seconds. I mean, again,
I think anyone who's looking to take control over what that next chapter looks like, especially if people are in corporate, but not even that. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that are franchisees. We have a lot of franchisees from other brands that are, unrelated to the beauty industry. But, I think the biggest thing is someone who wants to make a difference with a business that does good, but also provides them some great cash flow and stability. You have so much predictability in this business because revenue comes from contracts, from rental agreements. So you have very good assurance knowing what next month looks like, what the month after that. You have a lot of fixed expenses. So it's just a very, very easy business with a lot less variables of, gosh, what's the fall going to feel like? And what is spring going to do for business? That doesn't really affect. It's not seasonal. It's stable. It's consistent. So, I think people who want to graduate their career to something where they have that control, if they're not an entrepreneur, and for other entrepreneurs looking for a way to add something to their portfolio that has a lot of semi-absentee characteristics, automation and reoccurring revenues, which is, everyone loves that. So it's a great business for either side of that aisle, but just anyone, wanting to do something that does more, I think, especially with how it helps people in the beauty industry.
Yep. And again, I mean, the services that the cosmetologists are providing is a need, not a want. Like you said from the beginning of this conversation, it's, people need to get a haircut, and people want a haircut. They want to look good. And of course, there's other services other than in your studios besides haircuts. I mean, there's you kind of reach out to the different categories within the cosmetology space. So, but Jason, this conversation has been great. I mean, is there anything else you want to share with the audience? I mean, anything else that, again, for me as a consultant, helping people research, I mean, this is definitely a brand that I love to show. Obviously, there are certain financial requirements. This is not a, this is not a discretionary income type business, and it's not a discretionary income investment is the best way to put it. But it's just a fun brand. It's a great brand. I mean, the systems, your best practices, your developers, marketing, operations, very professional. But anything you want to close with? Anything else I failed to ask you, or that you want to add?
No, I appreciate the conversation. It's been enlightening for me to chat with you. I would just say the one thing that we didn't talk about though is, I've had the pleasure of knowing Scotty for, probably a year and a half now. Have worked on many different opportunities with people he knows that are candidates who have now become image owners. But if you're working with Scotty now, you're in the right hands. If you are not, I would encourage you. This is probably one of the best consultants I've ever met in franchising. So you've got, and that's the tough thing. You want to find someone who truly cares, who understands what your needs are, and then what kind of opportunities are out there that fit your personality and desires and objectives. So, again, just Scotty, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Look, I hope it's not our last conversation.
No.
I think it's going to be an interesting 3 to 5 year ride for you guys. I think you're going to be, I talked about that 900-pound gorilla, but I think, you're going to be the 1,000-pound gorilla. I think, and a lot of it has to do with the character of the people that was in the organization. I think that, and I got to meet, a lot of them last week at a conference, and it's just a great opportunity. And, again, unfortunately, it's not for everybody, and not for everybody financially, but it's definitely something to put on the I got to learn more list. And, I'd be glad to, help people out. But listen, stay in touch, Jason, because it's always a pleasure. I am actually going to be meeting Randy and his family first week in November for dinner. I'm
Oh,
driving out
nice.
there because I'm down south right now. So but I know they certainly speak highly of you, and they've enjoyed working with you. But anyway, this is Scotty Milas at scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. Another episode of What's Your Know Your Why. And all things considered franchising. A great conversation with Jason Olsen over at Image Studios. For information, more information on Image Studios, reach out to their website or reach out to me directly. Be glad to talk more about it. But Jason, have a great rest of the year, and I look forward to many more opportunities in seeing the brand grow.
Awesome. Thank you, Scotty. It's been a pleasure.